Hey, what's going on, y'all? T-Bob here.
And Jake as well.
And you're about to watch a little OTB LSU.
We're going to give you all the latest, greatest between LSU football, baseball, women's basketball, softball, and everything in between.
Bottom line, if you want to talk Tigers, keep it locked, subscribe, like it, and we hope you enjoy. I should mention, I should clarify. So I wasn't really, what's the old meme? I apologize. I wasn't really familiar with your game. I had some people yesterday come out and some people who I trust when it comes to football and talk about how high they were on Kevin Peoples, saying he is one of the absolute best in the game and that he is not the assistant defensive line coach. He is the outside linebackers and edge rushers coach and will specialize in pass rush, and that he's an absolute dog. Also, in keeping with that, getting $700K. So now you just paid, again, what did we say? Brian Kelly or Scott Woodward telling Brian Kelly, look, resources are not going to be an excuse. I'm going to give you all the ingredients you need, the finest of organics. I'll give you pure Japanese Wagyu. You better cook it right. And so now you have a defensive line, Jake, where between two coaches, you got $2.2 million a year, with Bo Davies making 1.5, Kevin Peoples making 7. You got, of course, Matt House, Blake Baker, the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country at 2.5. The spending continues. But again, I just wanted to mention Kevin Peoples again because it's a more exciting hire now to me after talking to people than I had originally thought.
Yeah, you know what will make you do that is it was so bad last year that you brought Pete Jenkins in, who was 80 years old, to try to fix some of the issues, and you try to put a Band-Aid on it in the middle of the season because the defensive line play was not what you expected. And so this year they're like, that ain't happening again. We ain't going through that again, right? So we're going to bring in two guys, and people I've talked to say that they might be the two best defensive line coaches like in the country. Like there's some lists going across like that have them 1 and 2 for what they did a year ago. So they like Scott is telling you, like, I never want to see that again. Like that's something like we never need to see that defense again. And he's putting the resources behind it now. And there's still going to be other hires. Like there's still going to be, you're still going to have to, obviously the back end, like you got to fix that issue as well. So it's not over. And again, we talked about, it might've been off air, on air, I don't remember yesterday. It kind of points to you elevating on the offensive side of the football and not bringing somebody else in to be the OC with the moves you're making on defense right now. Yeah,
I still firmly believe that it's either Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton, some mixture of the two as OCs next year. And again, that makes sense when you look at the offensive success, how the bowl game went, relationship Sloan likely has with guys like Bryce Underwood, just the unreal success that the wide receiver room has had since Cortez Hankton came over here. So yeah, I mean that like we said last year, that side of the ball was already chock full of superstars from a coaching standpoint. In terms of who maybe the DB coach will be, on threes coverage on Bengal Tiger, Texas A&M defensive DB coach TJ Rushing has gotten upgraded to legitimate candidate, as there may be some smoke there. It sounds like, kind of maybe reading between the lines, that Blake Baker's having a heavy hand in choosing these guys. So not a lot of him being handed, here's who you're going to have to work with. Corey Raymond is obviously still in the mix. Other names that on three mentions, and great work by Matthew Brune there, but Seahawks passing game coordinator Carl Scott, Memphis defensive backs coach Charles Clark, just names to be on the lookout for. But again, the only one that's really going to mean anything to you there is likely Corey Raymond.
Look, we try to do some investigative reporting, and he did follow the Off the Bench Twitter account about 10 days ago, and I thought maybe that was like a sign, just getting ready to come back to Baton Rouge. We'll see.
So what's interesting though, Jake, I'm so dumb that I took it to be like, yeah, for sure it meant that he was coming back. I thought that was great detective work by you. Just the news hasn't become official yet, but one of the more interesting things about this, y'all, are some of the parallels between the first team that LSU will square up with next season. Of course, we're talking about USC. That game's going to be in Vegas. It's going to be spectacular. When we talked about Matt House in the offseason and even during the year, Jake, what was the inescapable comparison here?
It was USC.
It was USC deciding to roll a bit too far with Alex Grinch and all the damage and erosion that did to the program and to Lincoln Riley. Well, granted, USC probably a year too late. They finally make that switch, but now similar to LSU, USC starting to stockpile defensive coaching talent as well. So first, we know they bring in D'Anton Lynn from UCLA, who, UCLA, that's actually how they were any good last year. Their defense was spectacular. I think it's a pretty solid hire there. Remember, they brought in North Dakota State head coach Matt Ince to be their assistant head coach and linebackers coach. That's grit. You got Dakota attached to your name.
Yeah.
Out in L.A., that's very funny to think about, but that's going to add toughness there that isn't there. They added a former Houston defensive coordinator and Doug Belt to be their DB coach, and now this was a name that LSU was rumored to be looking into for D-line. They hire Rams defensive line coach Eric Henderson to be their co-defensive coordinator. So we have this really intriguing week one matchup, y'all, in Vegas, where you have two teams that have incredible offenses that are going to be having lost Heisman Trophy winning quarterbacks. Two teams with god-awful defenses that threw a ton of money and a ton of resources into trying to get him fixed, and let's see who will win. And damn it, LSU, you better find a way this time.
Yes, you should.
There's no shame, I guess, in losing to Florida State the last couple of years, especially in the context that you were coming from, but this is year 3. This is the big jump year. And although I like these hires from USC, I think Nuss is better than anything they return at quarterback, and I think you'll be able to garner more defensive talent than they will be able to, though certainly the interior defensive line needs a lot of work in that regard. But it's so funny how these teams mirror each other going into that week one matchup.
Yeah, I mean, complete overhauls. And for USC, it was the question of would Lincoln Riley actually do it? Would he fire his buddy Alex Grinch? And he did it, obviously, last season because it had become like a situation where it was either going to be you or him, it felt like. Like, we're paying you a lot of money, and we didn't pay for you to have, this high-powered offense and be so bad on defense that you mirrored Texas Tech back in the day. That's not what we're trying to get done here. We're trying to win championships, at least play for conference championships. And he finally moves on from Alex Grinch. And just like LSU, they realized they had to go out there and they had to bring in the big guns. They had to spend some money, and they had to completely overhaul what it was. And USC is in a situation where they probably realize as well that the style of play does not really match up with what they've had in the past going to the Big Ten. It is going to change, right? So teams that aren't even as talented as them, they might struggle with because we got to fit a two-back run. What the hell's a two-back run? Yeah. They just don't know that world. So bringing in all new pieces on the defense and then allowing Lincoln Riley to do what he does, which is get the offense ready for the Big Ten. I mean, it's what they had to do.
So it's going to be fascinating to see who gets the defensive rebuild more correct out of LSU and USC. Again, I like LSU early on. It should be. Bilbo Baggins says, was the USC backup quarterback that torched up the bowl game this year the one who went in the portal? No, it was Malachi Nelson, former 5-star. I'll say this for Miller Moss. The bowl game was awesome. Great stats. Was it 6 touchdowns, 372 to the air. But if you actually watched it, it was not as good a performance as what Garrett Nussmeier had.
Right.
And that's not just because you could, well, and partially that's because, some of, I've said it a million times, what I was so impressed about Nuss was the situational play, making the plays to win the game. And Moss wasn't really threatening the same way that game. But just in terms of how they spin it, Moss was throwing some rainbows. I mean, we talking these things. I mean, this was like you could have gotten let's say they would have served snacks on these balls. You had enough time to serve snacks up there and there. These things were floating. They were kind of thrown up. And granted, good on him. He's trusting his receivers and he's going to get it. But it ain't. It's just a little. Just the stats did maybe not match up with what looked to be the potential of Miller Moss. Now, I like his story, and he's USC through and through, and I think that's rare and rare nowadays. And so, I hope Miller Moss ends up being good, but it's just to say that like his 6 touchdown performance for a lot of guys, that should be like, oh my God, this guy's going to be incredible. And I didn't come away feeling that. Like I do think that Garrett Nussmeier's an advantage there. Wow, Jake, what incredible takes.
I mean, those guys, they're just the best.
I think so. And if you think so, again, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the bell so you get notifications when we post every single day here on OTB LSU.